Hello everyone. Today I will be talking about sampling and different sampling designs. As we all know, in any research activity, we all are familiar with steps in designing research project. It has two important and fundamental dimensions. One is planning and second is implementation of the plan. In the whole process, we have to think of source of data and sampling, which is the topic of discussion, and then some practice. Further, the need to know and understand people's opinion and attitudes are more important now than ever before. Increasingly, institutions and groups relying heavily on the opinions and attitudes of customers constitutes concerned citizens, certain focus groups, etc. for decision making and developing strategy. Thus, TV networks want to know people's program preference and viewership, and magazines and newspapers want to know readership. While commercial houses, manufacturers, service providers want to know product needs, opinions, and preferences. So, who are the consumers or users of survey? Social scientists, as we all know, are interested in descriptive studies and hypothesis testing, and along with governments are interested in policy, planning, programs, need assessment, measure the effectiveness of an ongoing project, etc. The need for accurate information to the decision making process and to devise strategies exist at various levels. And in this context, survey studies, more specifically sample surveys, are the most common and popular source of basic scientific knowledge. There are two types of survey. A complete survey is called a census, like the ones that happen in our country after every 10 years, wherein the entire group you are interested in, the total population or universe, is covered in the study. Census thus covers all members of the population under study. The other, which is commonly used, is sample survey. It involves studying only a portion or sample of the total group in which you are interested in, and from it inferring information about the group as a whole. Sample is a representative part of the whole group, or what we call universe. This sample is usually just a fraction of the population being studied. When one studies just a fraction of the population and aims at generalizing or inferring information about the group as a whole, among other things, drawing representative and accurate sample becomes critically important for reliable generalization and predictions. It is because in sample surveys, generalizations typically are not based on data collected from all the observations, respondents, or events that are defined by the research problem, but only on a relatively small number of cases which are used as the basis for inference to all the cases or the population. For example, forecasting surveys of election polls is based on the responses of a relatively small group of respondents as to how the entire population of voters would vote in a given election. Thus, survey research for that matter, not just survey research, any other research demands high degree of precision and accuracy in the inferences of the findings that are drawn, and therefore of the things that are important in selecting appropriate sampling procedures. However, before we go into the detailed discussions of the sampling designs and the procedures, let us clarify some of the terms upfront. The first term is population. So what is a population? A population or universe is some group of people or objects in which researcher is interested in the context of a given study. It is aggregate of all cases that conform to some designated set of specification. For example, by the specifications, what I mean to say is, like students who are enrolled in the universities of Maharashtra, we can define a population as constituting of all students enrolled in the universities of Maharashtra based on what we designate as a population from whom we plan to derive our sample. One may similarly define population consisting of all households in a community, all registered voters, all books in a public library, members of a club, some records in an office, and so on and so forth. The specific nature of population depends on the researcher's nature of the problem and how he or she plans to get answers to it. Thus, a researcher who wishes to estimate a population value from the sample value should determine population involved. Okay, this need to be made very clear upfront. If one is interested in voting behavior in India and wants to draw sample so as to predict election outcomes, the sample should exclude all those who are below 18 years of age. Even all Indian citizens of 18 years of age or older is not adequate as individuals who have met the legal criteria before they can vote. Okay, so defining the population is a very important aspect while undertaking your research or deciding upon a sampling strategy. Definitely there are certain exclusion and inclusion criteria while defining population. The population must always be defined in three terms. Those are the content, extent and time for any research being undertaken. For example, content is the meaning including all, say for example, including content is all residents of 18 years or older. Extent means including only those samples, say for example, including only those samples who are living in India or are residents of India. And the third aspect, timing, is like you are talking about particular time frames, like include only those respondents or sample who are born during a particular date or year. Say for example, everyone born on February 29 will only be the part of the study. Okay, so and so forth. The next term, since now we have understood population, is to understand what is sample. So as the definition goes, a sample is a subgroup or subset of population or universe. The purpose of studying sample is to make some generalization about the population or the universe quickly at relatively lower cost and with high levels of accuracy. So the first and foremost question which comes to our mind, why the need for sampling? Okay, and this is why this particular lecture is precisely for. So as stated earlier, the reason for taking only a sample rather than studying the entire population are speed, low cost and increased accuracy and analysis of the data. By sampling only a small portion of a large population, it is possible to collect data in far less time than would be required to survey the entire group. Not only is data collection quicker, but data processing and analysis also requires less time because fewer pieces of data need to be handled. Rapidly changing conditions and the short turnaround time imposed in many surveys make the efficient use of time a critical variable. Speed is essential to ensure that data are fresh, especially when it comes to assessing public opinion in a volatile or contagious area before they change appreciably. The smaller amount of data gathered by sampling as opposed to surveying an entire population can mean large cost savings. By limiting the group to the surveyed, less time, hence less cost, are involved in collecting, formatting and analyzing the data. Further, it is also important to realize that using a sample from a population to infer something about the entire population involves a risk. The risk results from dealing with partial information. If risk is not acceptable in seeking the solution to a problem or the answer to a question, then a complete survey or census rather than a sample survey must be conducted. Determining the representativeness of the sample is the surveyor's or the researcher's greatest problem when sampling. Thus, another definition of sample is that it means a representative part of an entire group. And this all of you need to remember. So, the next term in line is the sampling unit. So, what is a sampling unit? So, to state, a single member of a sampling population, say for example a voter, maybe a household or an event, okay, a lifetime event, maybe marriage or death, these are events, is referred to a sampling unit. So if you are basing your data collection based on some of these things, it is called as a sampling unit. Usually sampling units have several attributes. However, only a few are relevant in any research. For example, in a population defined as all MA students in Pune University, as on 1st August 2020, the students have many traits, trait variables. Say for example, you know about the student's age, his or her height, his eating habits, his IQ level, his opinions and expectations of on n number of things. Okay. However, depending on the research problem, we may need to study only a few variables. Again, for example, if we are studying these students' nutritional status, then we need to study variables such as height, age and weight only, instead of all other variables such as IQ, opinions and expectations. Okay, so you need to, in short, you need to pick and choose. Okay, what are the variables or the traits which you are interested in your research, and accordingly you need to select your sample from the sampling unit, because a sampling unit may have many variables or many traits. So the traits of your interest, of your research interest, should be selected. The next set of terms to understand are the finite and infinite population. So, a population may be finite or infinite depending whether sampling units are finite or infinite. A finite population contains a countable number of sampling units. For example, all registered voters in Maharashtra at a given point of time. Right? This is countable. It is a finite number. We are specifying it at a given point of time. Okay, say maybe for example 24th of August 2020. We need to know all sampling units of registered voters in Maharashtra or any other state. While an infinite population contains endless number of sampling units. For example, again, unlimited number of toss of coin, Like if we take a 1 rupee coin and keep on tossing it, the possibility is endless, like heads or tails. Okay, but if we don't delimit it to how many number of times, so you can keep tossing the coins and that will be an infinite sampling unit, right? Or say for example, we are talking about populations of students who will be graduated from a university in 2020-21 and thereafter. Okay, if we make such a this thing, so from 2021 onwards, your population will, well, there will be like in 2022 also there will be students who will be passing out in 2023, 24, 25. So it's an infinite population. Okay, an infinite sampling unit. Thus, sampling designed to produce information about particular characteristics of a finite population is usually termed as a survey. I repeat this once more. Sampling designed to produce information about particular characteristics of a finite population is usually termed as survey. And the last term to know about before we jump into different types of sampling is the term sampling frame. So what is sampling frame? It is a complete list of sampling units in a population is called as a sampling frame. The complete list of sampling units in a population is called as sampling frame. Ideally, the sampling frame should include all the sampling units in the population. Often, sampling frames such as list of voters, telephone directories, list of employees are readily available. However, the appropriateness of any sampling frame has to be evaluated in terms of the particular needs of the study. It should be ensured that there is high degree of correspondence between a sampling frame and sampling population. So whatever we are going to frame as a sampling unit should actually be the representation of the wider or the larger population wherein we are doing the survey. Okay, so that's why whenever we say in research the sample is the representation of the larger population. So your sample should be always representative of the population. It should have the characteristics of the larger population. Okay, and that is what sampling frame is all about. So to our core topic of different sampling types. In the modern sampling theory, a basic distinction is made between two types of sampling strategies. It is called as probability and non-probability sampling. So what are these differences? In case of probability sampling, one can specify for each sampling unit of the population the probability that it will be included in the sample. In the simplest case, each unit has the probability of being included in the sample. In other words, a representative sample of any population should be so drawn that every member or unit of that population has a known and specified non-zero probability of being included in the sample. Say for example, again, when you toss a perfect coin, the probability that you will get a head or a tail is equal and known. That is 50-50%. Like there is a 50% chance, like when you toss a coin, that when it falls down, it will be either head, and there is a 50% chance that it will be tails. However, in case of non-probability sampling, there is no way of specifying the probability of each unit's inclusion in the sample. Okay, you can't guarantee कि each of the sample will have a 50-50% chance or some percentage chance of getting included in the sample, and therefore there is no assurance that every unit has some chance of being included. So that is why it is a non-probability sample. Now let us look into some of the probability sampling methods in which case each individual is chosen entirely by chance and each member of the population has an equal chance or probability of being selected. Okay, one way of obtaining a probability sample, most commonly used or most commonly stated method is the simple random method or random sample method. A random sample is through the simple random technique in which you give an individual in a population a number. Say for example, you have a population of 1 to 100. So you are giving 1 to 100, each person a number. Then use a table table of random numbers. There's a book what you get, like in our times we used to use the random table number books. Okay, today there are computer programming which can generate the same for you. And say if you have a population of say 1 to 100 and you need this thing 20 sample. So you put chits of this 100 people, and through lottery method, one of the methods what we use is like randomly pick up the first 20 people who comes, okay, of any number. That is the most common or what we call simple random technique. As with all probability sampling methods, simple random sampling allows the sampling error to be calculated and reduce selection bias. So we don't have any selection bias, or we are purposefully selecting say the 7th person or the 12th person. Okay, it is completely by chance, like the sample is being selected. That's why the sampling error reduces when you are using a simple random sample, and also the selection bias. You are not selecting by your the researcher is not incorporating any bias in selecting his or her respondent. Okay. Again, a specific advantage is that it is the most straightforward method of probability sampling. This I just stated you earlier. However, a disadvantage of simple random sampling is that you may not select enough individuals with your characteristic of interest, especially if that characteristic is uncommon. It may also be difficult to define a complete sampling frame and inconvenient to contact them, especially if different forms of contact are required. Say for example, using email, phone, post, etc. And your sample units are scattered over a wide geographical area. Okay, so these are some of the limitations of simple random sample. But in order to cover up this limitation, there are other techniques of probability sample also. So what is the next one? The next probability sampling technique is the systematic sampling, which is also the second type of probability sampling, where individuals are selected at regular intervals from the sampling frame. Say for example, the intervals are chosen to ensure an adequate sample size. Again, if you wanted a sample size of 100 from a population of 1000, I decide like I will select every 100% or every 10th member of the sampling frame. So every 10th person in the sampling frame will be part of my study, or every 15th person till I achieve the 100 sample size, 15, 30, 45, then 60, 75, so on and so forth. Okay, every 15, or if it is every 10, yeah, so it is in multiplications of 10, 20, 30, 40, you will select. So systematic sampling is that particular thing till the time you achieve your sample size of 100 or maybe 50 or 200. Systematic sampling is often more convenient than simple random sampling, and it is easy to administer. Like if you are in a survey situation, like if it is a systematic random sampling, like you go into a village, okay, and if you map the village, the number of households, and decide like which are the households to be taken, it will be very difficult in case of a simple random sample which household to select, even if it is simple random. So normally in a survey situation, what you do, like you go in with a systematic random sampling, okay, wherein you decide like I will interview every fifth household, like from a particular direction I will start moving in and around the village, and every fifth household I will note, and that will be my samples. Okay, and from that particular village you decide upon the number of samples what you. So that is one advantage of simple random sample. It is very easy to administer. However, it may also lead to bias. For example, if there are underlying patterns in order of the individuals in the sampling frame, such that the sampling technique coincides with the periodicity of underlying pattern. I'm trying to give a hypothetical example. Say, if a group of students were being sampled to gain their opinions on college facilities, but the student record department's central list of all students was arranged in such a way that sex of the students alternated between male and female, like 1 male, 2 female, 3 male, 4 female, so on and so forth. Okay, so it is alternating between male and female. So if I decide like I am choosing an interval, say I want to select every 20th student, what result it would on the sample, like it would result in a sample of all males or all females, right? Whistle in this example, the bias is obvious and should be easily corrected. However, this may not always be the case. Okay, like just what the previous example I gave you. Like when you are going in for a household level village survey, the 10th household or the 5th household, okay, it can be possibility of both male and female being getting selected, but one you need to remember like what time of the day you are going to do the sampling. Like if you are going to follow a systematic random sampling method, so how you are what time of the day, like if you go late in the afternoons or early in the afternoons, like in a village setup, it may so happen like the middle-aged population, working population might be in the field, and when you go for your survey, it will be mostly the older generation or kids who will be at the household. So when you are using systematic random sampling as a technique, you need to have these considerations also taken into context. If you remember, like what I said in the beginning, okay, whenever you are doing sampling, okay, there are some inclusion and exclusion criteria we just spoke about earlier, no? The content, the extent, and the time. Okay, so the timing in this context, in systematic random sampling context, gets very important. Okay. Now, the third type of probability sampling is the stratified method, in which in this particular method the population is first divided into subgroups or strata. That's why it is stratified, who all share similar characteristics. Okay. This method is used when we might reasonably expect the measurement of interest to vary between different subgroups, and we want to ensure representation from all the subgroups. For example, in a study of cancer outcomes, we may stratify the population by gender or by sex to ensure equal representation of men and women. The study sample is then obtained by taking equal sample size from each stratum, that is male strata or male population and female population, in order to understand the outcomes, cancer related studies outcome in both the genders. In stratified sampling, it may also be appropriate to choose non-equal sample sizes. Okay, so it's not always necessary you need to have equal male population or female population. Like say for example, in case of cancers itself, certain cancers like say for example breast cancer, it is much more prevalent in females compared to males. So if you are having a research problem which is trying to understand breast cancer, so your population, naturally the sample size of females will be proportionately much more. Okay, so you need to stratify the female population or female sample size much more compared to male, because breast cancer as a condition is much more prevalent in female gender. Okay, by doing this ensures a more realistic and accurate estimation of health outcomes. Okay, to give you one more example, say for example, in a study of the health outcomes of nursing staff in a city, if there are 3 hospitals, each with different numbers of nursing staff, say hospital A has around 500 nurses, while hospital B has 1000 nurses and hospital C has 2000 nurses. So you have 3 strata, 500, 1000 and 2000. So if you are going to take equal, say 100, 100, 100 from each, okay, so it's actually not giving right representation from B and C sample, because the sample unit in B and C is comparatively more, like B is comparatively more than A and C is comparatively more than A and B. Okay, so the sampling or stratification also be in that proportion. So what you can do, then it would like when you are like proportionately dividing it, say again for example 10 from hospital A, 20 from hospital B and 40 from hospital C. Okay, if I decide on that and my sample size is say 70 and I proportionately divide my sample like that, this ensures a more realistic and accurate estimation of the health outcomes of nurses across the city. Whereas simple random sampling would either over-represent nurses from hospital A and B and under-represent nurses from say hospital C. The fact that the sample was stratified should be taken into account at the analysis stage. Okay, this is also very important as researchers when you are doing your research and analyzing your data. Stratified sampling thus improves the accuracy and representativeness of the results by reducing sampling bias. However, it requires knowledge of the appropriate characteristics of the sampling frame, details of which are not always available, and it can be difficult to decide which characteristics to stratify by. Okay, So this example of cancer dividing it into male and female is a very simple example. Okay, based on the complexity of the research questions or the variables what you are trying to understand through your research, okay, your stratification can get complex if you are not able to define it, the characteristics of the sample properly. Okay, are you interested in certain age groups? Are you interested in certain people of certain class, caste? Okay, so stratification gets very important, and misrepresentation can lead to erroneous data collection and data analysis also, and thereby interpretation. Okay, so that is one important thing what you need to remember when you are using stratified sampling as a technique. The last method of probability sampling is the clustered sampling technique, in which subgroups of the population are used as the sampling unit rather than individuals. The population is divided into subgroups known as clusters, which are randomly selected to be included in the study. Clusters are usually already defined, for example, individual private doctors based on their practice. Okay, so you are already made clusters of private doctors in the city, doctors who are doing allopathic practice, doctors who are doing Ayurvedic practice, or doctors who we call homeopaths or homeopathy. These can be all form the group of private doctors, okay, but they have their own clusters: homeopathy, allopathy, Ayurveda, okay, and based on these clusters, again depending upon what the population size in each of these clusters, okay, you can based on your research objectives, your questions, you can pick and choose or give a sample size for each of this population or each of this cluster. Clustering can be done again in two stages. One is a single stage cluster sampling, where all members of the chosen clusters are included in the study. Like, say if I have three clusters, the above example of private doctors, of private practitioners, like allopathy, homeopathy and Ayurveda. So I will, in single stage cluster sampling, sample from all these clusters will be included in the study. While in two-stage cluster sampling, selection of individuals from each cluster is randomly selected for inclusion. So there's no guarantee, like even if you have three clusters in a two-stage cluster sampling, like doctors from each of this cluster will be, because you are randomly allocating this thing. Okay. Clustering should be taken into account in the analysis. Again, as I stated, in systematic stratified sampling also, you need to take into account, okay, what is the purpose of clustering, how was the clustering done, okay, do you understand or know about the characteristics of the sample, clustered sample, so and so forth. Say, hopefully all of you know about the National Family Health Survey, which is undertaken in our country every 4 years. Okay, this is a good example of cluster sampling technique which is being used. Okay, again it is done across the entire length and breadth of India. Okay, and this particular survey is more interested in understanding the various health indices of the Indian population. So they divide the Indian population into different clusters, and accordingly, cluster sampling can be more efficient than that of simple random sampling, especially where a study takes place over a wide geographical region. Just like I said, told, National Family Health Survey happens over a entire length and breadth of India. So cluster sampling is a very good sampling technique used by that particular survey. However, disadvantages include an increased risk of bias if the chosen clusters are not representative of the population, resulting in an increased sampling error. In case of non-probability sampling methods, the first method is convenience sampling, which is perhaps the easiest method of non-probability sampling because participants are selected based on availability and willingness to take part. Useful results can be obtained, but the results are prone to significant bias because it's a non-probability sample. No random technique is being used. Again, a significant bias happens because those who volunteer to take part may be different from those who choose not to. Okay, like say for example, if you are want to do a study among drug addicts, if your entire sample is of people who are not are not drug addicts, okay, there is a selection bias, no? You are interested in understanding certain things about drug users, and your entire based on your convenience sample, if you keep selecting people who are non-drug users, the entire purpose of your study gets wasted. Okay, so in short, a convenience sampling has that limitation. Also, one need to note that the volunteer bias, just what I said, people who wants to be part of the study participant but actually are not, is a major risk of all non-probability sampling methods. So it is not just about convenience sampling, but if you talk about quota sampling or judgment sampling and so involving technique, all of this non-probability sampling method has this limitation. Okay, the volunteer bias is a big risk. Again, the second method of non-probability sampling is the quota method of sampling. Is often used by market researchers. Okay, if you know about, like we keep on getting such surveys online, the same, which paste you like, which cold drink you like. Okay, so normally whenever a market research is done, this is based on market researchers use this technique of sampling called as a quota method. Interviewers are given a quota of subjects of a specified type to attempt to recruit. For example, an interview might be told to go out and select 20 adult men, 20 adult women, in which 10 teenage girls and 10 teenage boys, so that they could interview them about their television viewing practices. Ideally, the quotas chosen would proportionally represent the characteristics of the underlying population. This has the advantage of being relatively straightforward and potentially representative. The chosen sample representative. However, the chosen sample may not be representative of other characteristics that weren't considered, which is consequence of the non-random nature of the sample. Like sometimes when we talk about perception of TV viewing of older population, okay, if your sampling is just dependent on adult population of say till age 45, okay, you may not be considering the views of what people above 45 years want to view in TVs. So that is one disadvantage of a quota sample, again due to non-random nature of these samples. The third type of sampling is the judgment sampling, also known as selective or subjective sampling. This technique relies on the judgment of the researcher when choosing who to ask to participate. Researchers may implicitly thus choose a representative sample to suit their needs for specifically approach individuals with certain characteristics. This approach is often used by media when canvassing the public for opinions and in qualitative research. Judgment sampling has the advantage of being time and cost effective to perform, resulting in a range of responses particularly useful in qualitative research. Say for example, when one is conducting a key informant interview or a focus group discussion, you can pick and choose your sample. Okay, people who are knowledgeable about the topic or issue is more beneficial to be spoken to rather than going to a person who doesn't know anything about the issue. Okay, so judgment or purposive sampling has this advantage. However, in addition to volunteer bias, okay, which due to non-random nature, it is also prone to errors of judgment by the researcher, and the findings also may be erroneous. Okay, this will be potentially broad, will not necessarily be representative, because if we are talking to a specified group of people, okay, only those people may be knowledgeable about that issue. It may not be representative of the entire population or the entire, and that is the limitation of this sampling technique. Okay, the last one of non-probability sampling technique is the snowballing technique. The snowballing method is commonly used in social sciences when investigating hard to reach groups. Existing subjects are asked to nominate further subjects known to them, so the sample increases in size like a rolling snowball. For example, when carrying out a survey of risk behaviors among intravenous drug users, participants may be asked to nominate other users to be interviewed. Okay, because you won't find drug users on road, or you may not be able to identify them clearly in a given population. Okay, so you need to devise techniques wherein you somehow get hold of one drug user and through him you snowball to the other, and from the second one to the third one, from the third one to the fourth one. Okay, snowball sampling can be effective when a sampling frame is difficult to identify. Like if you say, like, what is the number of drug users in Maharashtra? You don't have a count, you don't have a sampling frame. Or say for example, forget about Maharashtra, if I just wanted to know what are the number of drug users, say in a city like Bombay or Pune, it's a very difficult number to collect. You don't have a sampling frame. So in such this thing, and since it's drug users are hard to reach population, okay, so any hard to reach population, you use a snowballing technique. However, by selecting friends, one of the weaknesses of this particular technique of non-probability sampling is like when you are talking to a person, he will give you contact of his friend. Okay, so and that friend will give contact of other friend. So by selecting friends and acquaintances of subjects already investigated, there is a significant risk of not only selection bias, but whatever characteristics or views these respondents may give may also be very similar, and they are the same people. We say birds of the same feather flock together. So in a snowballing technique also, when a person is giving you contact of the other person, is like basically his friend or acquaintance, and they go gel together each other. That is why he's giving you that person contacts, and his views and this first person's views also may be very similar. Okay, so that may be one of the biggest distinct. Okay? It will be very similar. The data being collected will be very generic, very similar across all the respondents. Okay, So again, whenever you are using a snowball technique, okay, you need to take this type of care while selecting samples. So to sum up, there are these 5 points which are put on the slide, which are important potential sources of bias that should be considered when selecting a sample, irrespective of whether it's a probability sample or a non-probability sampling method. First is sampling bias may be introduced when any pre-arranged sampling rules are deviated from. Like you have decided, like you are going to interview every 10th household or every 10th individual, and at the field level, okay, if you deviate from this rule, okay, there's a bias which creeps in. Okay, so you need to stay pre-agreed to the sampling rules, whatever you have decided. Again, people in hard to reach populations are omitted. Like say you wanted to understand current flood situations in Assam. Okay, and certain villages and the individuals who are completely under flood, you are not able to reach them. So you don't sample them. And you are just talking to people who are not other part of the flood. Will you get their perspective? There's a sampling error, no? Or bias, or you are not going to the hard to reach. Perspectives of people who actually matter have been not accounted for. Okay, so this again needs to be omitted, which will give to bias in sampling. Again, selected individuals are placed with others. For example, if they are difficult to contact, like I randomly contacted a doctor, he's not picking up my phone, so contact the next doctor. So again, it's a sampling bias. So as per your sampling strategy, if the 10th individual or the 5th individual or the randomly selected individual is supposed to be part of your study, or due to such reason is not picking up, or he may be diseased, you replace him by the next available person, brings in a bias. Okay, though there are techniques to replace them, okay, but this you shouldn't do it during the time of the study. Okay, trying to replace individuals. Again, there are low response rates in case of certain sampling techniques, वगैरह. So you need to see appropriateness of your sample size, etc. also for a particular study or the problem which you are trying to solve. Based on the your research problem, the gravity of the problem, your sample is being decided. Again, a low response rate will be there if an outdated list is used as the sample frame. Say for example, if it excludes people who have recently moved into a particular area. Like I am conducting a survey and I had a list which is 10 years old, and I have no idea about new people who have come into that area or into a society, into a living this thing. We don't have the list. That means I am creeping into certain bias in the sampling. Okay, so these are some of the things which you need to take care, and this is what a short introduction about sampling and sampling designs. Thank you.